is August. I have not done a wrap up for May, June, or July. So I have the pile of books and then some books that aren't in this pile to talk about. So I figured I would just wrap up all of the books that I've read in the last few months and talk to you guys about them. I'm also in my living room today because there's no light in my bedroom at all because it burnt out and it has to get fixed by my landlords. So I'm waiting to get that fixed, but otherwise, yeah, so we're just gonna have a chill video in my living room and we're gonna talk about the books I read this month. So the first book I read, I don't have a physical copy of. I read an audiobook of it. It is the second book in the Maze Runner series, so it's the Scorch Trials. It's about a team of teenagers who is set up in this world to complete tasks and such so that they can get information about how their brains work because they're existing in this deadly virus. I originally started reading, I read the first book a really long time ago, but I reread the first book and then the rest of them in May. And it was just kind of when the world started locking down because of the global pandemic and I felt it was fitting. So we read those guys and I gave The Scorch Trials 4 stars. I really liked it, I liked the story, but I mean, yeah, I think I probably just could have got more out of it. I really liked it and I really think it's a story a lot of people could read. It just not a new favorite for me. The next book I read was also an audiobook that I read from my library and is Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo, and I gave it 5 stars. I loved it. So it's about 2 girls who, one is in the Dominican Republic and one of them is in New York City, and they both find out that their fathers have died on the same flight, and it's kind of just them coming to terms with the death of their fathers, and it's just kind of a story about how they kind of deal with that in their own lives and how they proceed in their own lives. And yeah, I don't want to say much more because I don't want to spoil it, but it was really, really good. And I mean, I love Elizabeth Acevedo's writing, so I really, really loved that. And I listened to the audiobook and she narrates it, so now every time I read anything of hers, I just hear her voice and it's so beautiful. So yes, that was amazing. The next book I read, I don't think I mentioned this previously, but all of these books are in the order in which I read them, just so that I could keep it in order in my mind. The next book I read was An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green. I'm pretty sure all of you know this by now, but I gave this book 5 stars. It is one of my new favorite books of all time. I love it so much. I currently am in, I want to say the middle of, but I think I'm like 3 chapters in the next book. So I will probably be wrapping that book up in the next video for next month because hopefully I will be back on track and recording videos every month. So this book is about a group of people, mostly about the main character whose name is April May. She is going home from work one day, so she just finished art school and she works at this job that she doesn't really love, but it's a job, it pays the bills, and she's going home one day and she runs into this giant metal statue made of something basically that it's impossible that it exists. It doesn't have any resonant qualities. It's just a strange thing. Nobody really knows where it comes from. So she ends up reporting about it and making a video about it. And they find out that they have shown up all over the world. They don't know how they showed up. They don't really know why they're there. And she kind of becomes the spokesperson for these things that's become named Carl's. And she just kind of, yeah, it's kind of the story of her discovering those, coming to fame because of those things, and they kind of have to solve puzzles and they have to solve kind of what's going on and why they're there. Yeah, I don't want to say much more because I don't want to spoil it, but new favorite. I'm obsessed with this. I love Hank and John Green at everything they do. I've been following them for years and years and years, so I picked this up when I found out that Hank had written a new book, and it took me really long to read it, but I'm glad it took me as long as it did because I got to read it pretty quickly before the sequel came out. So yes, we love this. This is a new favorite of mine. The next book I read is City of Ashes by Cassandra Clare. It is the second book in the Mortal Instruments series. I'm trying to steadily get through these books. I have always wanted to read them, but I was confused in which the order I should read them and such in, and all of that. So I've watched a bunch of videos about it and done a bunch of research on them, and I am now confident to continue reading them. So I am reading them in the order that Cassandra Clare recommends on her website. So I can link that down below for you guys if you want that. But I don't really want to say much about this because it's a sequel. But basically, it's a story about a group of teenagers, and one of them is coming to terms with the fact that her life is not what she thought it was, and she has different abilities that she's not aware of, and she's a shadow hunter. The second book in that series, I gave it 4 stars. Yeah, that's kind of all I have to say about that guy, but I loved it. I'm excited to read more of them. So you will probably see a lot more of these in future wrap-ups because I'm trying to sort of catch up. The next book I read, this was for the Asian Readathon, and it is The Sun and Her Flowers. Wow. I'm trying that again. This is The Sun and Her Flowers by Rupi Kaur. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but that's my best attempt. This guy is just a book of, I think it's technically a sequel to Milk and Honey, but I'm not 100% sure. But basically they're just kind of like little Instagram poems, little poetry kind of about her life, depicting her life as a woman in today's society. It talks about a lot of topics to do with being a woman, but also like sexual assault and trauma and that kind of stuff. And that stuff kind of resonates with me, so I really liked it. I ended up giving this guy 5 stars, which is very rare because I usually don't give poetry 5 stars, but I really, really love this. And yeah, it's just kind of nice little Instagram poems and stuff, so there's that. Okay, the next book I don't have a copy of again. It was an audiobook I got from the library, and it is The Death Cure by James Dashner. It's the next book in the Maze Runner series, so I don't really have much else to say about that besides what I said previously, but I gave this guy 4 stars. The next book I read is Emergency Contact by Mary H.K. Choi, and I gave this guy 5 stars. I really loved it. It was pretty simple, but it was exactly what I was looking for in the moment. So basically, there's 2 main characters. So one of them is named Penny Lee, and she's going to her first year of university to become a writer, and she's kind of coping with the changes that have to do with moving to a different city for school and kind of adjusting to that and adjusting to getting friends and such. And then the other character, his name is Sam, and he wants to be a film producer, but he doesn't have the money to be taking classes currently, and his laptop ends up breaking, and he's kind of coping with relationship troubles. He lives in the cafe that he's actually working in, and I want to say it's a meet cute, but the description of the book actually says it's not a meet cute, but it's technically a meet cute, but they're super, super awkward. So they end up kind of coming together because of strange circumstances and become unlikely friends through this, and it's just really adorable, really simple, kind of just everything I wanted was just a simple YA. And this was also for the Asian Readathon. The next book I read, I also read an audiobook version, and it's because I didn't actually know what this was going to be, so I want to get myself a copy of this book just to actually have, because basically it was Good Morning, Good Night. I'm holding nothing, wow. It is Good Morning, Good Night by Lin-Manuel Miranda, and it is basically just little quote passages for you to read when you wake up in the morning and when you go to bed, and it's just really nice little like positive things or little cute things to tell you to like conquer the day, or I hope the day was amazing, and if it wasn't, you're gonna sleep and it's gonna be a new day tomorrow. So those were super cute. I didn't actually give that a star rating because it wasn't really a novel to like give a star rating. I just thought it was super cute, so yeah. The next book I read, I don't have a physical copy of. I got it from my library, and it was just an audiobook, but it is The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. Like I mentioned previously, I love her writing. I love the way that she tells a story. I ended up giving this guy 5 stars, and it's basically about this girl that is coming to terms with her parents' religion and kind of finding her place in the world, and she ends up finding slam poetry and finds out that's a way for her to kind of tell her story and come to terms with life and her life in the world. I thought it was just really nice story. It was really cool. I loved all of the poetry that was written, and it's also, I listened to the audiobook, so it's kind of a different experience, but the book is written in verse, and I really, really love that aspect of it, so I also gave that guy 5 stars. Okay, the next book I read is Blonde Roots by Bernardine Everastio. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I watched so many videos and listened to it so many times, and I still don't know if I actually said it correctly, but it's this guy. This was the Life's Library pick for the last 6-week period, but because there was some other shipping issues and stuff, it ended up becoming, I think it was 7 or 8 weeks long. And I ended up reading this on audio because I got the audio version before I got the physical book, but I gave this guy 5 stars. And this is basically a race-bent story about the transatlantic slave trade. Oh my goodness, I can't speak. And basically it switches the Europeans and the Africans. So basically the Europeans, or the white people, now become the slaves to the black people, and it is a super polarizing story. I would recommend this to anyone, honestly. It helps. It helped me a lot with coming to terms with racism and kind of understanding that, and understanding the fact that racism kind of has no bias. Like, you could choose any race and make them the negative people in the story, and I think it's really, really important. It's a really important book. I think it'll help a lot of people if you don't completely comprehend racism or its roots. I think this is a very, very good book to explain that. Okay, hi. I'm editing this video currently, and I realize that some of my words aren't exactly what I want to say, and I don't want to be insensitive, especially in the times that we're in currently. I am talking about race there, and I'm talking about the fact that the basis of racism basically could affect anyone. I ended up saying like the bad guys as if like black people are villains. I do not at all mean that. I just mean that racism could go either way, and like the person in the negative antagonistic position could be anybody. I hope that kind of clarifies. I think my word choices were not the best, so I hope this helps understand that. But if you have any questions or anything, feel free to ask. And it's also a story about the main character trying to evade her owners and get freedom out of slavery. There's a lot of things that happen in this that are just super, super eye-opening. The writing style is gorgeous. I think I listened to the audiobook, but I think I would say read the physical book because it would make more sense. I think a few of the times I had a little bit of difficulty understanding things because the people narrating the novel are very, very English, and they have very thick accents, which was fine, but it kind of got a little confusing for me. So I think reading the physical book would be a really good bet to understand it the best. Okay, the next book I read was Stranger Planet by Nathan Pyle. This is the second book that he has come out with. He used to, I think he still posts them. He posted comics of these little like alien creatures, and they talk about kind of how strange the planet they live on is. Their planet is very similar to Earth and the things we do, so it's kind of a narrative on how strange the world is. I didn't give this guy a rating because it's just a cute little comic, but I did read that guy and I loved it. The next book I read was the Percy Jackson and the Olympians, but the Titan's Curse, which is the third book by Rick Riordan. Don't really have much to say about this guy. I'm sure there's a lot of content everywhere if you haven't read Percy Jackson. I don't know what to tell you. I'm reading them for the first time. I don't really want to spoil anything, but basically this boy finds out he's a demigod, and it's kind of the process of going through his story, and yeah, I mean, they're super interesting, they're super lovely. I'm sure a lot of people have talked about these books, so if you want any more info, I'm sure you could just search it. But yeah, I think I gave this guy 4 stars. Okay, the next book I finally finished is Daisy Jones and the Six. I started reading this book when it had first come out, and I never continued it. I think it's just because I had other books on my radar, or I didn't have enough time to finish it, and I didn't read it. I ended up finding the audiobook version on Scribd, and I started listening to that, and I don't know why I didn't finish this previously. This is everything I want in a book. This book is by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and it is it's a narrative on the 70s music scene. So basically it touches on mental illness, the drugs, the just lifestyle of being in a band in the 70s. And if you guys don't know this, the 70s is like 70s music scene is kind of like the most interesting thing to me. I'm a really big music nerd, and I really, really love learning about the 70s and the music scene. So this is everything I want in a book, so I don't know why I didn't read it sooner. I gave this guy 5 stars, and it's basically about this girl named Daisy Jones, and she is an up-and-coming singer, performer, songwriter. She started writing songs for other people and decided that she didn't want to give her songs to other people, and so she started writing her own music, and she ends up signing to the same label as the Six, and they're looking for someone for a song, so they kind of add her on one of the songs, and she ends up becoming part of the band, and it's just kind of a story about that. I really loved everything about this book. I should have read it sooner, but I understand all of the hype around this, and I think I already mentioned, but I gave it 5 stars. I loved it so much, and I would recommend it to anybody who wants to read about the music scene or the 70s. Okay, the next 2 books I read were Heartstopper Volume 2 and 3. Those books are not, physical books are not actually available in Canada, so I read the webcomic, so I'm caught up on the webcomic, which I think goes into part of the 4th actual book of it, but I gave both of these 5 stars. It's a coming of age kind of story, so there's more characters in the 2nd and 3rd books now, but it's kind of the story of 2 boys coming to terms with their sexuality and what that means, and it talks about mental illness. I think I forgot to mention, but it's by Alice Oseman. I love her writing. I love all of her books. Every single book of hers that I've read, I am in love with, so I will continue to pick up her work. But yeah, they were just really, really good, really cute stories. I had read Daisy Jones and the Six for the reading rush, so that was my first book, and then the next 2 were the Heartstoppers. I touched on all of these books in my reading vlog, so if you want more on that, go back to there. But I read the graphic novel of The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. I love this book. It's been one of my favorites since I had to read it for school, and it's kind of about the 1920s and this man who built up this elaborate life for this girl that he loves, and that's kind of all I want to say about that, because I think it's one of those books that you just kind of, if you haven't already read it or heard of it, you just kind of have to jump in with your own 2 feet. So yes, I gave that 5 stars. I loved it. I love the art style of this, so if you don't want to read the actual book, I would recommend this, but I would recommend reading the actual book and reading this, because this is the full story, but it's shortened because it's they had to adapt it to graphic novel form. But yes, 5 stars, amazing, we love this. Next book I read for the reading rush this year was The Complete Persepolis. This is a book about a girl growing up in Iran, and it's kind of her dealing in the 80s, and it's her dealing with the war and the conflict there, and kind of growing up throughout this. I talked a lot about this in my reading vlog, so if you want more info on that, it'll probably be linked at the end of this video, or if you go back to my channel, it's the last video I uploaded. But yes, I gave this 5 stars. I loved it. I think this is, like I mentioned about Blonde Roots, this is a book that I think everyone should read. It's really, really nice. It's a graphic novel, so it's got a lot of pictures, it's got a lot of illustration to help you understand the concept, and I think it's just something that a lot of people should read. So I gave that 5 stars, and I recommend it to pretty much anyone. The next book I read is Rest in the Morning by R.H. Sin. This is another kind of Instagram poetry book, and I gave this guy 3 stars. yeah, it was really good. I just didn't like all of the poems. Like I said, for the last two, I talked about this book also in my Reading Rush video, so if you want more on that, it's kind of that, but I didn't really love everything in this, so I couldn't justify giving it 5 stars, but so yeah, there's that. Okay, and the last book I read was American Born Chinese by Jean Luen Yang. I hope I'm saying that right. I'm really bad with names. This book is about a Chinese boy that comes to a new school, and another Asian boy ends up coming to school after him, and he doesn't want anything to do with him, and he doesn't want anything to do with the other Asian girl at school because he wants to be an all-American boy, and he is in love with an all-American girl, so he wants to be normal and not the outcasted individual in society. There's another, so it's a combination of 3 stories that kind of combine at the end. So then there's that one. There's one that sort of sets up like a TV sitcom of a white boy who has a Chinese cousin that like makes him ashamed of himself and makes him not want to be friends with people and such. And then the third story is about this monkey who is put on Earth by a rock, and he becomes bigger than, so he becomes the monkey god, and he wants to be bigger than the monkey god and bigger than the gods. And so it's just kind of a story of all of these people that don't really want to be who they are and don't want to be associated with what they were born as, and they kind of learn to come to terms with the fact that what they are is actually really good and they should want to be those things and they're better themselves. I think it was an okay book. There's a lot in it that like I found questionable and I didn't really appreciate, but I'm sure another person might. So I ended up giving this guy 3 stars. But yeah, that's kind of all I have to say on that. I think I like the ending of this better than I liked the beginning, but it's about that. So with that, that is all of the books I read between May and July. I hope to actually have an August wrap-up once I finish August, and then my August wrap-up will be a wrap-up and TBR video. If you guys have any questions or anything, leave them down below. Let me know what you guys read, and that's the video. Bye guys!